Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Um, After finishing chapter 12 and 13, which I just sent you the word file, I'm going to use to make another video to explain these two chapters. Now we have chapter 14. Chapter 14. Chapter 14 is entitled "Father and the Great Manufacturer." And the previous two chapters were about the old woman اللي Stephen encountered when he left Mr. Bounderby's house. She seems to be a woman coming from a far place, and these details I highlighted, which I'll explain later in another video. And we have Rachel, the character, the worker who works with Stephen, whom Stephen loves and is supposed to marry after he gets a divorce, which he will not. Then the writer moved to the family of Gradgrind again, and we had a chapter entitled "The Great Manufacturer," Al-Musanna' Al-Azim. If you notice that the title somehow is ironic, because we are talking about people who manufacture great things, and then the content is supposed to be addressed to Mr. Gradgrind, who is supposed to manufacture a good family, a good students in his school. But the fact is that what Gradgrind has manufactured did not comply with the rules that he set earlier. So Louisa and Tom are not good products of his school, because they are going to deviate, they are going to work against the rules set by Mr. Gradgrind. So this chapter is going to inform us about 2 or 3 main issues. The first one is concerned with Tom. Tom, now an adult, and we heard Bounderby in the previous chapters said, "I will employ Tom when he gets his educational cramming." يعني عندما يكمل الحشو مال الفacts in his own mind, he will employ him in the bank. And it also talks about Sissy's education, because we know Sissy is now a student of the School of Fact. So here there is a reference to what happened to that kind of education. Is there any progress? Because we had a chapter entitled Sissy's Progress. So did that progress go on? Has it stopped? What happened to Sissy in chapter 14? And then we have references to Louisa, the character of Louisa, who is now an adult. She is now a marriageable woman. And the chapter also highlights the type of relationship, the kind of relationship that Tom has with Louisa. Louisa loves Tom very much, while Tom loves Louisa for his own service. Yani he is kind of opportunist. He tried to use his own sister. So as you see, the chapter is entitled with this. It started with this ironic title, "The Great Manufacturer." And عادة, the great manufacturer is a person who succeeds in his own profession. But here, when we talk about Gradgrind, he did not succeed. He failed actually, and this will be highlighted and underscored in the next chapters. So here is a reference the writer makes concerning Louisa. Louisa is becoming, said Gradgrind, almost a young woman. She is almost a young woman, and a young woman is supposed to get married, especially if there is a suitable man. So Time, with his innumerable horsepower, worked away, not minding what anybody said. This is an idea that the time of the novel has passed on. Time has elapsed. مضى وقت فترة طويلة since Sissy was a very young, let's say, child. Now Sissy and Louisa are old enough that Louisa might get married soon. Really, said Gradgrind, the period has arrived when Thomas ought to go to Bounderby. Thomas هنا أكمل التعليم مالته, and now he's supposed to go to Bounderby. Here, as I mentioned earlier, the issue concerned with Sissy's education. We understand that Sissy does not belong to this world. Actually, she opposes the concepts and principles of the School of Facts. So, definitely she is not going to progress or learn anything related to the facts. So, when they lost hope of developing Sissy and cramming her mind with facts, Gradgrind came to a conclusion that she is no more suitable in this school because she is not progressing. So he says here, I fear that your continuance at the school any longer would be useless. ماكو فايدة الاستمرارية في هذا العمل. I am afraid it would, Sissy answered. I cannot disguise from you, Job, that the results of your probation there has disappointed me. نتائج الاستمرارية في هذا المجال has disappointed Mr. Gradgrind. خيبت أمله. Has greatly disappointed me. You have not acquired under Mr. and Mrs. Chuckomchild anything like that amount of exact knowledge which I looked for. ما تطورت ولا استفادت أي من المعلومات على يد Mr. و Mrs. Chuckomchild. You are extremely deficient in your facts. أكو نقص كبير في كمية الفacts and Sissy. And then she says, I am sorry, but I know it is quite true. Yet I have tried hard. حاولت جاهدا ولكن لم أستطع الاستفادة من أي من الفacts اللي I am instructed with. I believe you have tried hard. I have observed you, and I can find no fault in that respect. Thank you. No, Job, shaking his head in his profoundest and most eminently practical way. And then, I wish I could have made a better acknowledgement, sir, of your kindness to your forlorn girl. Yani she is thanking him, and she started to cry and shed tears. And then Gradgrind suggested that you are useful to Mrs. Gradgrind in a generally pervading way. You are serviceable in the family also. تشتغلين بالبيت أفضل مما تقعدين بالمدرسة. So, I understand from Miss Louisa, and indeed so I have observed myself, that she is serviceable to Gradgrind, Mrs. Gradgrind. You can make yourself happy in those relations, in her relation with Mrs. Gradgrind. So here she stops her education and goes to Mrs. Gradgrind to help her in the house chores because she is more useful in this respect. And then we have the writer moves to the issue of Louisa, that she is old enough now. You see Gradgrind saying, quite a young woman, said Gradgrind, amusing يداعب Louisa. He held her in his arms, looking at her in the kindest manner, said, my dear Louisa, you are a woman. Yes, father. My dear, I must speak with you alone and seriously. Come to me in my room after breakfast tomorrow, will you? Yes. So what do we learn from such kind of hints, from these inferences? You can understand احنا يعني بطبيعة الحال when somebody talks with his daughter, كبرتي صرتي old adult, I'd like to have some word with you. I need to speak with you alone. Can we? So this situation foreshadows that, as if that they are going to talk about marriage, a kind of fiancé, somebody who proposed to Louisa through Gradgrind. So these ideas come to our mind when we read these words. Then we have Tom interferes in the situation and says, looking in at the door, he was quite a young gentleman, هذا Tom, of a pleasure now and not quite a prepossessing one. Dear Tom, she answered, rising and embracing him. How long it is since you have been to see me? Because he used to work with Bounderby, so they do not meet each other often, just like they used to. Why, I have been otherwise engaged, Lou, engaged مشغول, in the evenings and in the daytime. Old Bounderby has been keeping me at it rather, but I touch him up with you when he comes it too strong. يعني من يصير معاه شديد, he just mentions the name of Louisa, and so we preserve an understanding. وبعدها يصير تفاهم بيناتنا. So Louisa is a kind of a pretext, حجة, that Tom plays with when Bounderby gets hard with him. Has father said anything particular to you today or yesterday, Lou? No, but he told me tonight that he wished to do so in the morning. That's what I mean, said Tom. Do you know where he is going to tonight? With a very deep expression, no. He is with old Bounderby. They are having a regular confab together up at the bank. ليش at the bank? To keep Sparsit's heirs far off as possible. لأنه هاي تتجسس عليهم, you know. Her role will be discussed in detail later. So Tom seems to be aware about the issue that happens here. And now we have a reference that Mrs. Sparsit is spying, so they Gradgrind and Bounderby go and discuss these sensitive issues at the bank where Sparsit is not around. So كل هاي indications, evidences تنطينا فكرة إنه we are talking about a sensitive issue related to Gradgrind's family. Louisa, Tom is involved. It's a kind of marriage issue. Then here you find how Tom and Louisa are have a strong relation. You are very fond of me, ain't you? Indeed I am, though you do let such long intervals go by without coming to see me. So it would do me a great deal of good if you were to make up your mind to, I know what, Lou. To make up your mind of what? هذا أيضا another indication that they will talk about marriage, but Louisa still doesn't know what's happening. It would be a splendid thing for me. سوف يكون شيئا رائعا بالنسبة لي إذا Louisa زوجت Mr. Bounderby. Of course Tom will have promotions, will have more money, will have more authority, so and his business will develop. That's why it is very good in his interest. It would be uncommonly jolly. So her thoughtfulness baffled his cunning scrutiny. He could make nothing of her face. He pressed her in his arms and kissed her cheek. She returned the kiss but still looked at the fire. I say, Lou, I thought I would come and just hint to you what was going on, though I supposed you would most likely guess, even if you didn't know. I can't say because I am engaged to some fellows tonight. You won't forget how fond you are of me. Always trying to remind her with what's going on with him. So this chapter, as you see, this is the end of the chapter, of course. So this chapter, as you see, highlighted certain main issues. Tom is working at Bounderby's bank. Sissy's education came to a stop because now she is more serviceable at the house of Mr. Gradgrind, and Louisa is a young woman now, and the plans of marriage are knitted. تحاك إلها خطط, but she doesn't know. and finally we see how Tom uses his sister in order to achieve his own wishes. These are the main points that this chapter tackled in the novel. Thank you. اوكي طالبات، يعني هاي الافكار الرئيسية طبعا اللي شفناها في